How often is it that we get to talk about beef between two rap groups? The last time was probably when I talked about the beef between G-Unit and the Lox. We're taking this one from New York to Philadelphia. The Philly rap groups Major Figgas and State Property formed in the mid to late 90s and have something pretty important in common besides being from the same city.
At one time, the city did come together. At one time, before State Property, when Beans was moving, when Major Figgas was moving, when E was moving, everybody was united.
That similarity is one of the reasons for the tension between the two groups to begin with, which I'll be explaining very shortly. Major Figgas was a group composed of rappers like Cousins, Gilly the Kid, and Wallow, and several other rappers who wound up joining over time, like Spade-O, Dutch, El De Niro, Bianca, the sole female member, and other rappers who joined and left over the years. State Property was composed of Beanie Sigel, Freeway, Petey Crack, Young Chris, Neef Buck, Emilio Sparks, and Oskino Vasquez. Now, you probably know Beanie Sigel for being signed to Roc-A-Fella Records as a solo artist, and State Property for signing to the label as well. If you've been watching the channel for a while, then you probably know that I covered Beanie's beef with Jadakiss as well as his beef with Meek Mill before, and at the time of this recording, they're two of the most viewed videos on the channel. So it seems like y'all really like the Broad Street Bully. Beanie signed to Roc-A-Fella Records in 1998 and was featured on Jay-Z's third and fourth albums, Volume 2, Hard Knock Life, and Volume 3, Life and Times of S. Carter. Jay-Z apparently had gone to Philly to meet the Major Figgas who were making a name for themselves locally and wound up meeting Beanie and signing him to the label.
Every song, every motherfucking beat that came out, we was murdering that shit. And then we was going to New York. The battle motherfucker.
Yeah, I mean, like, you gotta really tell people, like, there's a lot of people that wasn't around for that era,
so
we was young.
Listen, Jay-Z used to come to the city and look for me and Beans and Gilly and everybody. He used to come looking for us. Like, I mean, you know, salute the Hove. You know what I'm saying? Like, he used to come looking for us. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, we was the hottest commodity and thing that was coming out of Philly at the time. You feel what I'm saying?
Then Beanie helped with connecting Jay to the group since he knew them from rapping and chilling together in Philly.
And we pressed up some CDs and we gave them out in the hood. And in South Philly, people was rocking to them joints. And then when I met Most Wanted, it was like a week later I met Gil and them.
Damn.
And we used to meet up.
Shout out to Most Wanted.
Yeah, Southwest, everybody.
Yes.
Me, Gil, Spade, we locked in Dutch. What? You
me and C met in a syrup house.
Yeah.
Michelle called me out.
So y'all was going to get lifted. I get lifted.
Yeah.
Y'all was going to get lifted, huh? Y'all was trying to fly. I believe I can.
I'm a fan already.
Yeah.
Because they got tapes.
Gilly at this point was signed as a solo artist to Texas-based label Suave House Records, but was looking to get the group a record deal as well. They wound up not signing to Roc-A-Fella, however, due to the amount of money that was offered to them. For example, in an interview with Mikey T, Major Figgas member Bump J would say that they offered them $50K as a group, and that Gilly had gotten $100K from his solo deal, and Gilly felt that they should all receive that much, if not more.
Gil was like, Tony Draper just gave me $100,000. You know what I mean? And I believe that each and every one of y'all is worth what I'm worth, if not more.
Also, he would mention that the deal was going to go through a management company named Black Friday, not just Roc-A-Fella Records.
It was going to be me, Gil, Dutch, Spade, Lava. And Gil had just signed with Tony Draper. I never forget it. He signed with Tony Draper. We went and had this meeting. And he was like, Jay want niggas to sign. He want niggas to sign to Black Friday. He don't want to sign us to Roc-A-Fella.
Which was what?
Black Friday was a management company, but with Sadiq and Roller.
Black Friday was run by Sadiq and Roller. Those two, Beanie actually credits with introducing him to Jay-Z and Dame Dash on the song Remember Them Days, featuring fellow Philly rapper Eve from his debut album, The Truth. Dutch, in an appearance on Math Hoffa's My Expert Opinion, however, would state that they were offered $11K for each member.
Hove offered us a deal. Us and Beanie Sigel, Major Figgas and Beanie Sigel. It was supposed to be the dynasty. So the first record that we recorded was Philly. It was a record called the P, the A, the I, the L, Philly, right? And when Hove heard me say what I said, he was like, yo, we got to do this, right? And then he was going to do the M, the A, the R, the C, the Y, just to make it work. When he offered us the money, it was $11,000 that he was offering each major figure with opportunity. Because I don't want to slander the 11,000. I want to say it was with opportunity.
Right. Just like Gilly had a solo deal at Swab House, other members had gotten deals as well. Ab Laiva wound up signing to Dr. Dre's Aftermath Records and later joined the Clips and Sandman to form the group Re-Up Gang. Dutch and Spade-O became a duo outside of the group and wound up signing to Lance Rivera's label Entertainment, along with artists like Cameron and Charlie Baltimore, and even featured on Cameron's second album, SDE, on the track Where I'm From.
Listen to the record, Where I'm From.
Where I'm From was one of my favorite joints.
How many bars you think you did on that record?
50.
50-something bars, right?
Yeah.
I did a 16.
Wallow was an original member of the group, like I mentioned, but he wasn't very much involved in this beef because he got locked up and sentenced to 20 years in prison and didn't get out until 2017. Gilly made an appearance on Shannon Sharp's podcast, Club Shay Shay, and was asked about the situation, in which he would say that because he turned down signing the group to the label, Jay-Z told him that they're going to have a hard time in the industry, aka blackballing.
Jay and Dame came back with the offer. I didn't like the offer. I thought it was a slave deal. I thought we would have to sell a quadrillion records to make some money, so I turned it down, and that was the situation.
But what transpired after that?
I mean, some things were said about making it difficult for whatever.
For you to be in this game.
But
does that happen a lot?
Yes.
If you refuse to sign with someone, it's like, okay, you're done. You're not gonna work in this industry.
It happens a lot in this game.
For example, members of Major Figgas would state later on that the group was blocked from performing at Powerhouse in Philly by Jay-Z, as he threatened to not perform if they allowed Major Figgas to perform.
We were supposed to perform at Powerhouse in Philly. If y'all know what Powerhouse is, Powerhouse is like the biggest show in Philly.
Yeah.
Jay said if they perform, I'm not performing. So who you think they was gonna go with? They was gonna go with Jay, right?
Right.
So they didn't let us perform at that joint.
Apparently, since the deal fell through and Jay was still wanting to sign a group from Philly, State Property was formed and signed to the label instead. According to State Property member Emilio Sparks, they signed to Roc-A-Fella in August of 1999.
Because I came in 99, I think they was over in 97, we got signed in 99, August of 99.
Beanie Sigel and the Figgas knew each other like I mentioned earlier, and they even worked on songs together before the beef. For example, they have the songs Philly and Philly's Finest. Also, they were featured on the song Dead Man Walking from the album The Tunnel by Funkmaster Flex and Big Cap, which was released in December 1999. Also that month, Jay released his Volume 3 album, which features the single Do It Again, Put Your Hands Up, featuring Emil and Beanie Sigel. Some people felt that Jay was sending a subliminal shot at Major Figgas on his verse. The Figgas later put out a song called Throw Your Hands Up, using the beat from the Jay-Z song, which would appear to be a response track. Also in 1999, they independently released the mixtape Figgas for Life, and then wound up getting signed to Philadelphia label Rough Nation Records, and re-released it as an album the next year. In February 2000, Beanie Sigel released his debut album, The Truth, on Roc-A-Fella to critical acclaim. So apparently there was some tension, considering it would appear that State Property took the place of Major Figgas as the Philadelphia representation on Roc-A-Fella. This, however, was not the only problem that drew friction between the groups. Things did get a bit violent, which I'll be getting to soon. Now we're going to get into what happened on wax and on the radio. In 2001, Spade-O released a solo mixtape titled Independence Day, which features the track This Is For The G's, on which he makes a mention of someone named Chris, which could be seen as a subliminal shot at young Chris from State Property given their close proximity and what had been going on.
I know I get a little lifted, a little twisted, but if you cats like Fab, I'm terrific. I wonder who put you up to this, you Great Western. Who put you up to Chris? And I'ma keep shit for real, man, you got me pissed. And on my X-Files, you going up my list.
Young Chris and Neef Buck from State Property, who also were a duo by the name Young Guns, dissed Spade and Dutch in a freestyle on the Philly radio station Power 99. They directly called both of them out, mocking their names and having several bars aimed at them.
Y'all know Ace of Blade and yeah, I'm saying Tony Dutch. Right. Ho. Now these are my people. So what's the what is beef between you and? Come on, let me go ahead, do you, and then we gonna talk.
They also make references to the Spade track that I just mentioned, which would make it pretty clear that this freestyle was a response to that song from the mixtape. They also would diss the Major Figgas by calling them minor figures, so a shot at the whole group was made.
Yeah, the minor figures, this time they fucking with a minor. But when they see me give me crazy ways,
They called out the Major Figgas record sales, claiming that they only sold 10,000 copies in their first week, among other lines like one calling out Spade-O and alluding to him being a crackhead and calling Dutch a snitch.
You ain't heard a verse week. Why you rapping? Scrap figure for life, then a dime the first week.
A few diss tracks went back and forth over several months. For example, Dutch put out a freestyle which used the beat from the T.I. song I'm Serious, and he sends a shot at Beanie. Other members of Major Figgas also took shots at State Property members on a mixtape titled Lucky Hands, and Spade did a freestyle as well on which he took shots at the Young Guns. After the Young Guns freestyle on Power 99, Major Figgas made an appearance on the radio as well with a freestyle responding to State Property. Beanie wound up calling the radio station and arguing with Major Figgas members live on air.
Hello, who's this?
Who is this?
Speak your name, state your name, gangster.
Come on, man, y'all know who this is, man. Y'all can't be serious, man.
We serious, dog. We real serious. You can't stop nothing over here, huh? Get it right. We serious. You think you can stop us? Be real with yourself, dog. We men. We all know each other.
Man.
We men.
I know you ain't talking to them.
I'm talking. Hey. For hours. Hey. I'm talking.
That's your boy. What's up, Rock? What you want to do, man? You all zaddied up and wiggled out, nigga. What's up? I know you ain't rapping, man. I know y'all niggas ain't rapping.
No person. No, who that is? Beans. Ho. What? Wait. Shoot ahead of your clique. What's up?
What?
Yeah, you heard me? What you mean, what?
How?
Champ, I mean,
you
chump.
Weak, man.
Yeah.
You can't be serious,
Hey,
man.
dog, what you mean? I hollered at you like a man. I hollered at you like a man when you wanted to squash it. Now you coming at us crooked. You know I never, you ain't never could touch me, boy. You remember when I came down to South Philly in your hood and destroyed you in front of your team? Yeah, bang anywhere, gang. You don't say, wait, why ain't time to come to Gilly? Why ain't time to come to Gilly? You lose that gorilla mentality. Young boys out. Anytime I'm around, you ain't no gorilla killer no more. I know you, dog. Don't come at us. Yo, listen.
I
know you. Listen. Gil.
You was nobody before this rap game. Nobody knew you. No hoes mess with you. You was nothing.
Yo, Gil, listen.
Don't play with me, boy.
I'm talking to Gilly and I'm talking to Beanie.
Play with me.
Listen, Gilly, slow down.
Man, I'm not no kid. You running with kids like Mike Bivens.
All right, listen.
Holler at us.
Hey.
Beanie also had a track named Time to Get on which he would mention Gilly. Speaking of Beanie and Gilly, as I mentioned earlier, the beef between the two groups did get violent, and I'm going to talk about one of those situations now. I mentioned this recently in the video where I talked about the beef between Gillie the Kid and Lil Wayne. Gillie and Baby were in Philly for All-Star Weekend and were on South Street at a store when Beanie pulled up and confronted Gillie. There's different accounts as to what exactly happened, but an altercation between the two definitely occurred. According to Gillie, they walked down the street a bit to talk alone and were going back and forth about the dissing that occurred between them, and then Beanie wound up throwing a punch at him, but he dodged it, and then they wound up leaving because police were around and Gillie had a gun on him and didn't want to be arrested.
He was like, what's up, Gil? Let me holler at you. I said, what's up? He said, no, let me holler at you. I said, come on. I did just like this. I tapped him and said, come on, let's walk down here. I don't want you to think I'm fronting. So me and we know each other.
Right.
Mm-hmm. So we walk down. We in front of the TLA and we talking. And I'm saying like, that's the second time y'all disrespected us, man. But I talk with my hands. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, that's the second time y'all was on BET. Y'all called us minor figures, blah, 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 blah. I'm noticing, right?
You sucker pussy. You dropped the
I'm noticing that Beans is not really, he listening to me, but he more or less paying attention to everybody on South Street,
right,
looking at us.
Right.
Because everybody, we just was on the radio arguing.
Yeah.
So everybody looking like, yo, there go Gillie, there go Beans, yo,
right.
Right? So Beans is like, yeah, but like, Gil, like, you call me a boy on the radio or something to that aspect. And then kind of put his hands in the air like,
and sucker punch you.
No, the fuck he didn't.
You punched him and he dropped his cheese.
I see where your Rumble game at. Real talk.
No.
Trying to get me out of there. And I looked
Is
at
that considered a sucker punch?
No,
That's a sucker
It
punch.
was a sucker miss because I looked at that shit
You
like
slipped it?
I slipped that shit like Floyd Mayweather.
We'll never
And
know.
then we did get into one of
like
these.
this.
If it was nowadays, it would be on somebody's Instagram.
Yeah, we gotta get Mac.
We gotta get Sigel on the phone. We gotta get Sigel on the phone.
That's my brother for life.
No, he
feel
sucker
what I'm
punched
saying?
him.
So you did it, everybody break it up. That's it. It's
No,
over.
me and him was like this.
Y'all tussle.
It was All-Star Weekend.
Oh my gosh.
So the cops was right on the corner. And the only other person that was out there that was next to us was Lil Mooka.
Did the cops help you?
No, listen, shut your bitch ass up. Was Lil
Get up,
Mooka,
sir.
right? So as me and Mac is kind of on this type of time, Mooka run up and say, man, you drawn, man, you know he got his gun on him. So then we kind of let each other go.
Right.
And I'm about to run because we are engaging in some shit on South Street. I got a big ass gun on me.
And South Street's packed with police for people that don't know.
It's All-Star Weekend, so it's police everywhere.
Gillie would also state that he wound up going to Beanie's neighborhood looking for him on a different day after their altercation.
We had some words. I'm like, oh, nigga, you know it's on.
Right.
Blah, 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 blah. He backing up saying what he's saying. And then that's how it went.
Right.
And then the next day, if he know, I jumped out of Nice Town. I went down to Roc-A-Fella store.
A bunch of places Beans wasn't.
What the fuck out of here.
You pulled up.
No, I really had a vendetta against
You
every,
wanna keep
at this
pulling
point.
up. Nobody on the corner.
No, get the fuck
Where
out of
you
here.
at?
Actually, when I pulled up in Nice Town, your old block where you was from, it was about 15 niggas out there. And if any nigga that was out
Not
there
your old block.
they know.
You got to pass because I'm from there.
They know that nigga ain't lying. That nigga did jump out.
According to others, like Baby for example, Beanie swung and hit Gillie, but Gillie did nothing in return, which made him want to stop associating with Gillie afterwards.
Beanie come in the store, grabbed him, walked him outside, and he had a blicky on him. We all got blickies on us. I got 100 niggas with me. But a nigga grabbed him and brought him outside. And a nigga whoop whoop and he ain't do nothing. I lost all respect for him and then I stopped fucking with him.
Some comments online also say that Beanie slammed Gillie into a car. Regardless of who was correct with exactly how the fight went down, like I said a minute ago, the point is that it happened. Sometime around then, Gillie took aim at Beanie on a freestyle as he mentions going to Sigel Street, which is the name of the street in South Philadelphia that Beanie grew up on and where his rap name comes from. Now I'm gonna take a minute out to remind y'all to hit that subscribe button if you ain't done that yet, and check out the Patreon page. I've been posting updates on there lately about what I'm working on, and plan on posting some other things as well. For example, remember how I just mentioned that I put out a video about the Lil Wayne and Gillie the Kid beef? I announced that on Patreon before I even finished it, so you can go there to get a sneak peek at what to look forward to. Sometime after that altercation between Gilly and Beanie, Oskino put out a freestyle dissing Major Figgas on which he uses the beat from the Grand Puba single 360. He calls one of them a snitch, which I imagine to be Dutch once again, as someone else called him a snitch in State Property as well, like I mentioned earlier. He also mentions being in a movie, which would be the State Property film, which was released in January 2002, and disses Major Figgas again for only selling 10,000 albums in their first week. He also calls out Gilly for getting beat up by Beanie, which would mean that this was made sometime after their altercation. Speaking of which, we're going to be going over another one of those now. In June 2002, Major Figgas member Spade-O allegedly got into a fight with Larry Anderson, aka LA, who was close to young Chris from State Property, and then wound up coming back with someone else and shot and killed LA. Some sources say that during the shooting, Spade-O reportedly shot himself as well, and the blood was used to convict him of the murder. It was rumored that young Chris snitched on Spade-O for the shooting, but he would deny that when asked about it in an interview.
That ratting thing, going on in the city, come on, man. Be for real, man. Be for real. Till y'all guys show me a statement, man. Keep my name out your mouth, man. Straight up, man. Show me some proof. I ain't gonna put nobody behind bars, dog. That ain't in my blood, you heard?
Sometime after the murder, Chris also did a radio freestyle about Larry. In the freestyle, he has the lines, "It was a rumble, but they brung their gats," and "Nowadays, niggas take fights to hammers," which seems to be alluding to the fight between LA and Spade. Some sources say Spade-O was the one who fired the killing shot, while others say the person with him did it. Either way, it's an unfortunate situation, and Spade-O wound up doing several years in prison for the murder, and Major Figgas lost yet another one of their original group members, like in the beginning when Wallow got locked up. Shortly after this, the group would start to disband. They didn't put out another album and were mainly focused on their solo careers. Gilly, for example, was with Cash Money for a few years, and Dutch, as I mentioned earlier, was signed as a duo with Spade-O, but they didn't get a chance to release their debut album because Spade was locked up.
My thing was, we were in Interscope first. We had a $1 million deal over there. Spade ended up going to jail. I never got a chance to fulfill my obligation. So I want to know from the people at Interscope, why, if my partner goes to jail, I'm not allowed to fulfill the obligation of the 3-album deal I signed with y'all.
State Property, on the other hand, released their self-titled group album in 2002, which was also the soundtrack of the film of the same name, and then released their second group album titled The Chain Gang Volume 2 in 2003, which featured the Grammy-nominated hit single Can't Stop Won't Stop by the Young Guns. The Young Guns would make mentions of LA in their music, like for example on their debut album Tough Love, they have the song Never Take Me Alive featuring Jay-Z, and they rap about friends that they lost. State Property as a group at this time was also starting to disband as Beanie got locked up in 2004 and did a year. Also in 2004, the Roc-A-Fella co-founders split up, with artists deciding to either go with Jay-Z to Def Jam or sticking with Dame Dash. Beanie chose to stick with Dame and Biggs, while the rest of State Property chose to stick with Jay. Beanie would also state that most of SP wasn't supportive of him while he was locked up. Not long after getting out, however, he would choose to sign back to Roc-A-Fella under Jay-Z and continue releasing music. However, State Property as a group was essentially still on the outs and not putting out music anymore. Major Figgas, on the other hand, unfortunately had more issues with the group members on top of Wallow and Spade-O doing time in prison. Over the years, Chops, Lil Ruck, and Dirty Reek all wound up being murdered over various situations. There were still subliminal shots occasionally thrown between the two groups that went on while they were suffering from internal conflicts, however. Gilly, for example, in one freestyle has the lines, "Fake niggas don't eat long, your man gets killed but you don't ride, you just make rest in peace songs." which would appear to be aimed at the young guns for their songs like Never Take Me Alive that I mentioned earlier. Later on in June 2006, Gillie was shot in the arm and leg while in Philly. It was rumored by some to be done because of the beef between the two groups, but that hasn't seemed to be substantiated, however. Then in December 2008, Beanie Sigel was going to be hosting a free concert in Philly in which he invited other Philly rappers like Gillie, Freeway, and more to perform as a show of unity for the city. So it would seem at this point that Beanie at least had decided to squash the beef with Gillie. A few years later, Spade-O was released from prison and continued making music. Individual artists from the two groups have made amends, however. For example, when Dutch was a guest host for a while on Math Hoffa's My Expert Opinion, Emilio Sparks made an appearance on the podcast, and they seemed to be cool at that point. Overall, this was a rap beef that was going on around the same time as the Jadakiss and Beanie Sigel beef, but stayed a bit more local as it was more of an internal situation considering the proximity of the rappers involved and how most of them had personal relationships with one another. However, that didn't mean it had any less severity to the people involved. If anything, it was more so considering the physical altercations that occurred because of it that I mentioned, and maybe even more that occurred and might just not be well known. If you're from Philly and were listening to these groups back then, let me know your favorite songs or memories involving them in the comment section below. What are your thoughts on the beef between the Major Figgas and State Property? Do you think it was really the fault of Jay-Z for not giving Major Figgas a deal they felt was good enough and then signing a whole different group of Philly rappers? Do you think MF and SP should have just tried to talk things out before taking it to the streets? Let me know what you think.